Starting off this countdown, we have Nicole Frenchman. Nicole Frenchman was last seen in downtown Edmonton, Canada on July 9th. A month later, a missing persons report was filed for her. Now, I'm not too sure why it took that long, but family and friends were concerned after she went that long without being in contact with them, and she hadn't been on social media at all. She was living with her friends at the time of her disappearance, so she didn't have a fixed address. After police interviewed her friends and family, apparently Nicole was last seen getting into a large, possibly gray pickup truck, but we still don't know why, who was driving that truck, and where she went. But police are finding this case suspicious, and after 3 months of her being missing, they are worried that she is dead. If you have any information on this case, please contact the Edmonton Police Service. Moving on to number 9, we have Luis Davila. In March of this year, 31-year-old Luis Davila decided to visit his girlfriend in Mexico. After spending time together, he decided to head back to his home in Bentonville. He left on March 29th, and that's the last time anyone has ever seen him. He was last seen wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, driving a silver 2016 Nissan Maxima. Had he drove straight from Mexico to his house without any lengthy breaks, the trip would have taken 15 hours. But alas, as time went on, he never returned home. Police believe that he was kidnapped on his drive home, but we don't know for sure. Lewis and his car to this day have still not been found. Currently, the FBI are pursuing all leads and ask that anyone with any information call 1-800-CALL-FBI. Coming in at number 8, we have Mark Sweet. 58-year-old father Mark Sweet had some fun plans for the month of November. He had plans to meet his grandson and pick up a new puppy. 2 things that he was very excited for, and 2 things he didn't get the chance to do. Last anyone heard from him was on November 8th. He had spoke to his daughter Samantha Guest about the upcoming plans at around 9 a.m. that day. That was the last time anyone had heard from him. Few days went by and Samantha began to worry about her father. She said that he had taken days to himself before, but 3 days went by and they heard nothing. All their calls went to voicemail. No one knows what happened to him or where he is, and his family is worried sick. Any information on Mark's whereabouts, please contact the Ontario Provincial Police. In our 7th spot, we have Brian Bone. Brian Bone disappeared in November while celebrating his 24th birthday in downtown Orlando. According to friends, they went out for brunch for his birthday, and then afterwards they went to a couple of bars. The last bar they hit up was Swigs, and they left it around 7:30 that night. That was the last time anyone saw Brian. Brian was missing for about a week until his body was found. It was discovered by a paddleboarder out on Lake Ivanhoe on November 26th. Police identified it as Brian, but we still don't know what happened to him. Was he kidnapped and then tossed into the water? Did he get super drunk and fall into the lake? And why did his friends leave him at the bar? Like, I don't know about you, but I always make sure my friends have a way to get home. Anyways, it's sad that this case had to end like this, and so close to his birthday too. Moving on, at number 6 we have Taylor Pomaski. Earlier this year, Taylor Pomaski made the move from Florida to Texas for a new job opportunity. Months later, on April 23rd, Taylor posted on Facebook that she was in a relationship with a man named Kevin Ware, a former tight end for the San Francisco 49ers. 2 days later, she updated her status saying that she was married. Days later, she disappeared. Taylor was last seen at a party she threw in her home on April 25th. Since then, no one has seen or heard from her. Sadly, sheriffs believe that she is no longer alive at this point. So what happened at that party? And does her partner have anything to do with this disappearance? If you have any information on this case, please call the Harris County Sheriff's Office. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Glenda Pardon, Dwayne Selby, and Jack Grimes. All these cases are connected, and you'll find out why. So on October 22nd, Dwayne and his friend Jack Grimes headed out to attend a horse show in Fort Worth, Texas. However, the men never arrived at the show. 3 days later, Dwayne's mom, Glenda Pardon, went out searching for her son. On that day, she was seen on video with an unidentified man at a business. Then she disappeared without a trace. So she literally disappeared while looking for her son and his friend, who also disappeared. Could it be that the same person is behind all their disappearances? On October 26th, Jack's car was found abandoned at the side of the road, and later his body was recovered. But Dwayne and Glenda are still missing. Anyone with information should contact the Tulsa Sheriff's Office. Moving on to number 4, we have Latesh Norris. Back in early November, Latesh Norris traveled from from Indiana to California to be with her boyfriend and spend some time on the beaches there. However, on November 5th, shortly after arriving in San Diego, she called her mother on a stranger's phone in distress. She told her mom that she got in an argument with her boyfriend and that she didn't have access to her own phone anymore. Before hanging up, she promised her mom that she would call back. Sadly, she never did. On November 10th, Norris was reported missing, and since then her mom has been searching for her daughter all day and night. On top of that, no one has been able to get in contact with her boyfriend, Joseph or Joey Smith. What was the argument about? Did Joey kidnap Norris? If you know anything, please contact the San Diego Police Department. In our third spot, we have Elena Roy. On November 3rd, 83-year-old Elena Roy got in a heated argument with her husband. According to him, they were arguing about the placement of a picture frame. At around 1:30 that day, she stormed out of the house. That was the last time anyone had seen her. When she didn't return home hours later, he reported her missing and notified her family. As of now, there have been no signs of Elena, but her family is hoping for the best. What's weird is that the police conducted a huge search for her, which brought up nothing, making the case a little suspicious. Was foul play involved? Who knows? And police say they aren't ruling it out. Anyone with information about where she might be, please call the San Diego Homicide Unit. In our second spot, we have LeDexter Pelt and John Dubois Jr. These two Alabama friends headed out on November 4th to Sacramento on a trip to visit more friends. But after arriving in Sacramento, the two disappeared without a trace. The only thing police have been able to recover are their cell phones. Security footage shows the two getting into a dark blue 4-door sedan at the airport. After that, their whereabouts remain a mystery. After their family didn't hear from them for 2 days, they filed a missing persons report. On November 9th, police were able to track Pelt's phone to a Super 8 motel, and John's phone was found by a bridge by a hunter. Obviously, the police searched both areas, but this sadly came of nothing, and they still don't know any information on the car that picked them up from the airport. Anyone with information about their whereabouts is asked to call the Gridley Police Department. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Heidi Plank. On October 17th, 39-year-old mother Heidi Plank went missing in downtown Los Angeles. That day, she was captured on video walking her dog in the area. Her dog was later found on the 29th floor of a high-rise apartment building. Heidi was nowhere to be found. A month later, her car was found in a different residential parking garage, several blocks away from the apartment where her dog was found. As of November 29th, an apparent lead has led officers to a landfill in the area, but they have not released any suspect information or details on what led them to that landfill. But police claim they found forensic evidence from one of the apartments that suggests that Heidi was killed. So maybe they had a lead that her body was buried in this landfill. I just hope they get justice for Heidi. Any information can be directed to the Robbery Homicide Division of LA.
Starting us off, the number 10 is the Goddard family. In September of 1999, Dr. Yves Goddard took his 2 kids Camille and Marius fishing in the ponds of Planquerie, France. I tried googling how to pronounce it, you guys, nothing was coming up, so I apologize. Now, he told the boat owner he wanted a boat for a cruise and would bring it back on the 5th, but before he left, he bought a bunch of floor cloths and cleaning products. Boat rides can get messy, I guess. Now, during a boat inspection the next day, officers found one of the kids sleeping and all seemed well other than the fact that the doctor was acting weird. The next day, a waffle vendor remembered seeing the trio, but by day 4, the boat was found abandoned. A dinghy was found nearby and on board was Eve's checkbook and a jacket and nothing else. Authorities also found morphine and blood in the doctor's van after the family were nowhere to be found. By the 8th, the police searched the family's home where they found significant amounts of blood everywhere, and when it was tested, it turned out to be his wife's, who no one had seen since the 31st of August. Over the years, other items floated ashore the coast of Brittany, like IDs, the bones of Eve, and the skull of one of his kids. It was clear he had most likely killed his wife and then killed his whole family, including himself, but why? Coming in at number 9 is the Martin family. Back in December of 1958, Kenneth Martin, his wife, and 3 daughters went for a day trip to Columbia River Gorge and never returned. 3 days after their day trip, when Kenneth failed to show up to work and the kids failed to show up to school, the family was reported missing. The first step was searching their house, where they found everything was as normal as could be. Drying dishes, laundry, the usual. Police found the family's abandoned vehicle and nearby a handgun covered with dry blood. Nothing came of that, but the bodies of Susan and Virginia were found the next year. Their bodies had been floating downstream near the gorge, and autopsy results showed they had both drowned. Most people think Kenneth crashed the car into the river, whether on purpose or by accident, and that's how the whole family died. At number 8, we have the Beaumont siblings. I can't even imagine losing my siblings, they're my whole goddamn life. So way back in 1966, 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Anna, and 4-year-old Grant disappeared from Glenelg Beach in Australia. Their parents let them go to the beach often as they always came home by their curfew anyway. They were a good bunch of kids. But even still, I would not trust my 9-year-old to babysit my other 2 children, let alone go to a public beach alone. Anywho, when the children left at 10 AM and didn't return for their 2 PM curfew, the Beaumonts got worried. By 7:30 that night, their mother had called the police and was completely inconsolable. Witnesses at the beach said they saw the kids with a tall blonde guy with a thin face, which kinda sounds a bit like Count Olaf. Is anyone else getting that feeling? Just me? Now, a local vendor also told authorities the kids bought a meat pie, which was strange because the kids had never purchased one before and because their parents hadn't sent them out with any money. This led to more unanswered questions. Where did they get the money for the meat pie? Why did they buy it to begin with? And most importantly, where did the children go? There's still $1 million reward regarding their disappearance. Some think the man abducted them, while others fear they were washed out to sea or Grant got pulled out and his sisters attempted to save him, with all of them perishing in the process. Is it me, or does this whole case just sound a lot like the Baudelaire siblings from a series of unfortunate events? This man literally sounds like Count Olaf. It's the true story come to life. Filling at number 7 slot is the MV Joyita, I hope. Now, back in 1955, a fishing and charter boat was lost at sea, missing its intended destination by 5 weeks. There were around 25 passengers and crew aboard the vessel, and admittedly, they all knew the ship was in extremely poor condition before they set off. Their radio only had a range of 2 miles, and it had a bunch of corroded pipes all over it. Regardless of all that, the ship was incredibly buoyant, so how could it have even sank? The air search mission couldn't find the boat anywhere, but a merchant ship managed to find it drifting 600 miles away from its origin with no crew or cargo. All they found was a doctor's bag and a ton of bloody bandages, with the radio turned to the universal distress signal. Other than those clues that they left behind, no one knows what happened, and the crew was never seen again. Who was bleeding? Where did they try and go to get help? Why did they get on board to begin with? So many unanswered questions. Now at number 6 is the Gill family. Back in January of 2002, an Argentinian family of 6 were reported missing with no one knowing their whereabouts. Ruben and his wife Margarita worked as landlords and were a pretty basic family. On the 12th, they went to a family friend's house, and that was the last time anyone saw them. Police investigation revealed that Ruben had called a woman in Rosario multiple times the next day, but were unable to trace her. No relative or friend knew anything, but were sure they wouldn't have just disappeared voluntarily. They didn't have a car, they both had jobs, their kids were in school, they have no reason to leave. In 2006, the family's lawyer claimed the police were involved in the disappearance because they had been in a previous one. 2 years later, a raid was carried out at the home and they had found dugout wells all over the property and cleaned up blood on the floor. Ruben was a fun, sociable person, but in the days before the disappearance, he seemed quiet and worried. Different provinces were searched too, but with no new leads. What was also odd was how the landlord of their new home said they had left behind all their money and possessions, but when the police got there, nothing was found. He had also weirdly given them a 3-month vacation that month when he had never in their life before given them longer than 2 weeks. And apparently the two parties didn't like each other much either, so where'd the family go? My guess, the landlord got rid of them. Coming in at number 5 is the Mary Celeste. People have such official names for ships, I swear I would name mine something short and sweet like the Oyster or the Pearl. Anyway, on the morning of the 7th of November 1872, Captain Briggs, his wife and daughter, as well as a 7-member crew set out on a journey from New York to Italy. The journey was meant to take 1 month, but the ship never reached its destination. A British ship called the Del Gracia saw the Mary Celeste drifting in the Atlantic near Portugal, so the crew decided to investigate. 6 months worth of food was found as well as all the crew's belongings, but the lifeboat had been used and deployed. The floorboards were under 3 feet of water, but the state of the ship was fine. It wasn't flooded and it definitely wasn't beyond repair. The captain of the Del Gracia actually knew Captain Briggs and knew he was a very capable sailor, so the scene made no sense. Till this day, no one knows what happened to anyone on board. It's speculated that they abandoned the ship thinking the damage was worse than it was, but then didn't survive after that. And number 4 is Roanoke, aka the Lost Colony. Back in 1587, Josh White led a colony to Roanoke Island, which is present-day Dare County in North Carolina. Now before Josh, 2 attempts were already made to try and found the first English settlement in North America, but both attempts failed due to various reasons. The main one being bad relations with the local Native Americans and the settlers. Either way, when Josh got there, supplies and resources were slim, and so he went back to England to get more supplies in 1588. He told the residents of the colony that if the colony was taken by force, to carve a cross in a nearby tree so he'd know that that's what happened. Like, I love how he'd think if the colony was being overtaken, the first thing anyone would think to do would be like, oh wait, amidst this pillaging, let me quickly carve a cross into this tree. Either way, he ended up coming back in 1590 to find the settlement meticulously abandoned. All the fortifications were dismantled with care, but he found no carved cross anywhere. Instead, he found the word Croatoan carved into a post, and that was the name of a native tribe that were allied with the English at the time. White assumed that meant the colonists moved to Croatoan Island, but investigations pointed to them being killed by the Powhatan tribe. Yet there was no evidence of a massacre, so again, we have no idea where they went. Filling at number 3 slot is Carol A. Deering. In August of 1920, the schooner, which had 10 crewmen aboard, set sail from Norfolk, Virginia to Rio de Janeiro with their cargo of coal. The original captain of the ship got ill a few days before its departure, so he was replaced and off the ship went, and they reached their destination safely, and they all lived happily ever after. Not, that's never the case on Top 10. A lightship keeper said he saw the ship on its way home and was hailed by an unidentifiable crewman who claimed the ship had lost its anchors. The keeper tried to report it, but his radio wasn't working, so he couldn't, but what he found odd was that the crew seemed to be milling around suspiciously for no reason. The next day, another ship saw the Deering near Outer Banks, which was weird because that would have been a strange course for them to take if the ship was really on its way to Virginia. A day later, it was found aground and on the Diamond Shoals with its sails still set but all the lifeboats missing. Due to bad weather, it took surf boats 5 days to reach the ship, and as expected, it was completely abandoned. All the crew's personal belongings were gone, papers, the anchors, even key navigational equipment, all gone. Despite an extensive search, no logs were found either. But the most viable explanation people have come up with is that a mutiny must have occurred due to the crew's apparent dissatisfaction with the new captain, who already had an uneasy relationship with the crew. Is that not dramatic? Now at number 2 are the Sodder children. This one is long and detailed, so keep up people, it's worth it. Fayetteville, Virginia, Christmas Eve 1945. Italian immigrants George and Jenny Sodder went to bed along with 9 of their 10 children. The last one was away in the army. Yes, it was a huge family, I know. Now that night a fire broke out in the house and 4 children escaped, but 5 disappeared without a trace. George tried to go back in to get the remaining 5 children who were all upstairs, but the downstairs floor and staircase were already engulfed in flames. So he tried something else. Now he usually kept a ladder propped against the house, so he thought he'd use that, but that was also suspiciously missing, and he then thought he would drive his truck next to the window, climb on top of it, and go up from there. But again, weirdly, neither truck would start despite them being perfectly fine the day before. They even called the fire department twice but got no response, and by the time the crew came, it was 8 AM and the house was just a pile of ash. After the investigation was over, there was no bodily remains found amongst the rubble, so they suggested to the family that the fire was so hot it fully cremated the kids, but George and Jenny had their doubts. They even went to a crematorium where they were told that bones remained even if they were burnt at 2,000 degrees for 2 hours. The fire only lasted 45 minutes. Months before the fire, a stranger told George the 2 fuse boxes at the house were going to cause a fire. Around the same time, another man tried to make him buy family life insurance and got angry when George declined and said, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke and your children are gonna be destroyed. You're going to be paid for the dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini." Now the night of the fire, Jenny got a weird call from an unknown woman who seemed to be laughing at Jenny, and despite knowing the front door was unlocked, she went to bed anyway. In the middle of the night, she had a long bang on the roof and then a rolling noise. It was later found to be a napalm that had landed on the roof. The house's lines were found cut, they weren't just not working. Someone else said they saw the missing kids in a car across from the fire, another said she saw 4 of the 5 kids along with 4 Italian adults at a hotel, but despite following lead after lead for decades, the parents never found anything. And finally, at number 1 are the Springfield 3. Back in June of 1992, 19-year-old Susie McCall, her friend Stacy, and Susie's mum Cheryl all went missing from the McCall family home. The girls had just graduated at the start of that month and were last seen around 2 a.m. the morning after their graduation. The two were planning to sleep at their friend's house, but it ended up being way too crowded, so they just went back to Susie's. They did get there since all their stuff was there, but the next day the friends had plans to go to a water park with this couple, and after not showing up, the couple went to the house to find the front door unlocked with nobody inside. There was broken glass on the floor, the lamp had been shattered, and their dog was in distress. While they were there, the girl received several phone calls from a random man who kept making sexual jokes. Stacy's mum got to the house hours later and was searching for clues in a panic and checked their answering machine to find a very strange message, which she then deleted. Like, this is evidence being erased here. But the main suspect of the kidnappings was Robert Craig Cox, a convicted robber and kidnapper. He had apparently told the media the girls had been killed and their bodies would never be recovered, but killers also tend to lie for media attention, so we don't know.
At number 10 we have Felix Moncla. Alright, we're going to be combining a few things on this list. We're going to have stuff here that will make you afraid to leave your door unlocked, and we have stuff that will have you running around with a tinfoil hat on, scared that aliens will stick cameras up your butt and put your brain in your dog's body. This one is a super eerie case. It's 1953 and some military radar picks up an unknown blip. It seems to be something that's just hovering. It's right over Lake Superior in Michigan, and the military wants some info about what this thing is, so they send out Felix. It might be a hidden attack from some leftover Nazis, who knows. Felix got into his fighter jet, sped off to figure out what this thing was. The people in the base were watching the two little markers get closer and closer and closer until it was right over the one at Lake Superior. Then it seemed like they collided and just disappeared. The official report was that he crashed into an enemy plane, but there was no signs of a crash, no wreckage, nothing. How do two planes crash into each other and there's no debris? Maybe Felix went right into a wormhole into another dimension. Or he was snatched up by aliens and they're putting cameras in his butt and switching his brain with his dog's brain, who knows. At number 9 we have Brandon Swanson. Brandon was driving home late one night in Minnesota. He might have been drinking, or maybe he just wasn't really paying attention to where he was going, but he ended up in a ditch. His loving mother and father left to go grab him, but he wasn't where he said he would be. So they searched for him for hours. This entire time they were talking on the phone with him. While talking on the phone with him, his father heard him yell out, "Oh shit," and then the phone just went dead. His car was found 25 miles away from where he said it was. A 500-person search party was sent out, but he was never found. At number 8 we have Garnell Moore. This one is a really sad story. Garnell was a young boy with no real family. He was passed around from family member to family member, each taking turns to take care of him. One day he was just gone. People started asking questions, which brought the police into the picture. After a bit of investigating, it turns out that the last person who was taking care of Garnell was his aunt. She told the police that she couldn't take care of him anymore, so she left him on the steps of a child services building. But when the police went to check the place out, it didn't exist. But there was no evidence linking the aunt to the disappearance of Garnell. And the other family members didn't have any explanation of where he might have gone. So was the whole family just keeping one giant secret? We'll never know. Unless someone comes forward, then we'll totally know. At number 7 we have Henry Avery. Let's move on to a happier story. This one is about one of the most bad dudes who ever lived. Henry Avery was known as King of the Pirates. This dude probably drank more rum and spread more chlamydia than 6 Charlie Sheens taped together. Between the years of 1694 and 1696, this dude was notorious and took down over 5 different ships for everything they were worth. His biggest get was the Gagny Sowie. Him and his crew of dirty, scurvy-ridden debauchees took over this boat, and what they found wasn't just a bunch of fruit and booze, but 600,000 pounds worth of gold and silver. This guy literally won the pirate lottery. If we do a little conversion on this bad boy, the take was worth $52 million. Actually, over $52 million. This guy was now the biggest baller in town. He was the most loaded pirate who had ever lived. He split his money with the rest of his crew and then disappeared. No one ever saw this badass again. He was lost to the world and probably became a king somewhere and died from having too much sex. At number 6 we have Virginia Carpenter. I want you all to picture it. It's 1948. Everything's in black and white. People are wearing long trench coats and everyone always has a cigarette. Virginia was dropped off by a cabbie but never made it home. She was spotted talking to 2 men in a car. Over the next few days there were people who claimed they had seen her all over the city in that car with those 2 men. The last sighting was a hitchhiker who claimed that she was Virginia, but after that she was gone for good. Number 5. Brianna Maitland. This one is super strange. Brianna was only 17 years old when her and her mother went out shopping. At one point Brianna left the store to go talk to her friend outside. When her mother finally caught up with her, Brianna seemed stressed out and she was acting strange. Following night Brianna left work early and just vanished. The part of this story that is so weird is her car was found next to an abandoned house. In the front seat was her paycheck and her purse, but it seemed that she had drove there on her own free will. There was no sign of a struggle. At number 4 we have Karina Sagers and Annette Sagers. This case definitely left a couple of boys and their father with some emotional scarring. In the early 80s, Karina Sanders, mother of 3, just went missing out of nowhere. One minute she was waiting at a bus stop and the next she was gone. Karina's family was pretty broken by this, but then in 1988, the Sagers' youngest kid, Annette Sagers, went missing from the same bus stop. Okay, hold on. How are you gonna let any of your family go back to the bus stop after one of you goes missing there? That's an accident waiting to happen. Here's where the story gets really messed up. There was a note left at the bus stop that said, "Mommy came back, please give the boys a hug." What's even crazier is that the note was in Karina's handwriting. Are you serious? She came back to get her daughter but left her sons? Dude, this is gonna leave the kids with trauma over level 9000. At number 3 we have Jacob Wetterling. This is a pretty standard story of kids hanging out and having fun. Jacob and his buddies were riding around on their bikes, checking out the town. They went to rent a movie. Some pretty standard kid stuff. On their way back home, Jacob and his friends were stopped by a man holding a shotgun. Never a good turn of events. The guy told them to get off their bikes and then took each one of their bikes and threw them into a ditch one by one, after which he started to interrogate the kids at gunpoint. Eventually he asked them all their ages. After this he told Jacob's friends to run into the forest and not look back or he would kill them. The last time anyone saw Jacob was when he was being pulled by the man into a strange house. After that, the man and Jacob were never found again. At number 2 we have Amy Bradley. Another situation of people trying to enjoy themselves and all their fun gets torn down before they can sip back their first ice cold margarita. Amy Bradley was on a cruise with her parents. She was getting day drunk probably, hanging out, having a good time, eating food, laying in the sun, all that standard stuff. But one day she was gone. Everyone was checking for her all over the boat. They were checking for her everywhere to see if she fell overboard. No one could find anything. The boat then docked in Curacao and a huge search party went out, but they couldn't find a single sign. Years later, a picture was sent to Amy's parents. It was someone who looked a lot like their daughter, but there was no information on the picture. And years after that, a sailor said he had spoke to Amy in a Curacao brothel. She might have been kidnapped on the boat and then sold into sex slavery on the island. And in the number 1 spot, we have Joan Gay Croft. In 1947, a massive tornado swept through Middle America. It was knocking the hell out of everyone's home and killed over 100 people. One of these people was Joan's mother. Joan's father managed to survive, but he was severely injured. Joan and her family members were brought to a local hospital, and Joan and her brother were told to stay in the basement. Just in case another tornado came through town, this would be the safest place to be. It wasn't long after the family got settled into the hospital that 2 men in army uniforms arrived. They were searching for Joan. The hospital staff complied with the men, even though they had no idea who these 2 men were. Joan left with them and then she was gone forever. She was only 4 years old when this happened.